This is my movie Demon Box. This movie has changed a lot of times, and it probably changed most once my son was born. Because then I realized I'd have to be telling these stories to him at some point. And how would I do that? How would I not mess him up the way I was messed up? Or is that just inevitable?
To begin with, I just want both of you to tell us a little bit briefly, to introduce yourselves and share what's your background in filmmaking and how did you get here?
My name is Sean Wainsteim. I'm a filmmaker in Toronto. I make shorts and commercials, and I went to art school to create robots that chase people around galleries, and then 4 years later I was making movies. And that's, I guess, how I got here. So I mix selling my soul during the day, making commercials, to buying it back and spending far too much money making my own films. And that's how I live my life. Aurora?
I'm not a filmmaker. I write plays, and I have a novel that will be published by Strangelight, which is an imprint of Penguin in about a year. But plays are similar to films that you watch on stage. So Sean approached me about working together on this project.
Yeah, there's always seemed to be a narrative and theatricality to your stuff, and I'm a huge fan of your plays, and I always describe them as like you're watching these things that have very, very specifically their own voice and their own magic, and you're enchanted by them, and they're funny and entertaining, and you're enjoying them, and then 3/4 of the way through they kind of like something hits you and it all sorts of adds up, and you're like, oh, this is what this is about. Oh, this is a serious topic. Oh my gosh. And I was just deceived, and it was just like there are all these beautiful experiential magic tricks that I've so loved. So I wanted that for this film, which was started off as a me attempting to dive into the center of the topics that I hadn't ever dealt with, that was sort of circling around my work thematically. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to bravely do that. But Aurora, you do it first. So I wanted that feeling for my film. And so invited her to collaborate with me, and she was kindly into it. And that's how it started.
So how do you normally come up with ideas? How do you generate ideas for films, or in your case, Aurora, plays and novels, etc.?
I don't know. Ideas come from the gods. I don't know. I can't speak for Sean, but I never know what I'm going to write until I'm halfway done. So I wish I had a more concrete answer to that. It's often something that I feel compelled to do, and then when I have a draft of something, I realize I have an idea. And I know that's a boring answer, but that's how it goes. Yeah, feels it feels like more of an intuitive process than a planned one.
I think it's different for me, and depending on the time. Like a lot of times it's like, oh my gosh, this deadline's coming up. What ideas do I have? And there's sort of this urgency that brings out whatever the things have been surfacing that I don't really know are percolating. And that's kind of interesting. That's at least a starting place. But then a few years ago, I sort of created dedicated time to think about what I should make instead of what I could make, and just open that up to like, I haven't ever created without urgency. And it was nice to just sort of sit in a moment and think about like what could a story be, and what there's still like a framework in terms of a location or some resources, but spiraling out of that usually is some kind of pragmatic thing there. I think lately that kind of dovetails with like other questions that are in my head more deliberately, and then once the idea starts to come down, I start to figure out what the story is really about, and then exploring it that way. And then it keeps changing as you're making it, and you keep checking in with what it is you're trying to say.
Can you tell us briefly about creative process from the concept to the execution? Because as I know, you were saying in description somewhere that you were making this film for 10 years. So how did it happen? Why was it 10 years? When I was watching the film, I kind of felt, it's my guess, so let me know if I'm correct, that you probably have started from the idea of documentary about your grandfather, and then it's kind of developed to what we see as a demon box. So how did this idea develop over 10 years?
I started with this all began before I was going to have a kid. And it was an idea to look at critically at the sort of the key moments in my upbringing and the stories I heard that kind of shaped who I was. So it was that initial nugget of this kid and his grandfather and how the trauma gets kind of passed on. So it started up this little kernel of generational trauma and like how we carry those things forward and pass them forward. And from that nugget, Aurora, she and I met in a park a few times and chatted, and then she ran off and spun something. Do you want to talk about that, Aurora?
Yeah, we literally met on a slope in Trinity Bellwoods Park. I believe that Back to the Future was a free film screening that evening, but we met to discuss this, and you gave me the sort of starter idea, which was interesting. It was wild though, because it was about your life, and obviously I haven't had the same life. And so I think I went to a place of like a fable, based on what you had told me, because it wasn't my life experience. And so I wrote what was essentially like, I think, a 10-minute play. There was a lot in there that changed and evolved over the years. And yeah, you fell in love, you had a baby, you had lots of life occur. And it's very personal to you. So I think I remember over the course of this being made, there were many things that happened that felt personal, that felt like it was maybe too close to be objective.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. As Aurora came back and gave me a beautiful screenplay with lots of fun and things I didn't understand and had to look up Hildegard. And I remember Jazzica. There's another character in it in this original thing, which I still think about. And it was this beautiful thing, and it was exactly what I asked. And I generally had done stuff that was very fable-ish. And I'm like, this is not accurate at all. Where I'm like, make a fable, make a beautiful thing in your voice. I'm like, no, this isn't exactly what happened. And so we changed. We went back and forth a few times in the drafts, and then I think I submitted for some Arts Council grants with a draft that we were happy with. And then I found out I was going to have a son, and the idea of making a film about generational trauma and not talking about where it was going to go felt disingenuous to do that without exploring that aspect of it. So I when we got some grants and didn't get other grants, like financially didn't have the money to make it at the time, and having a kid, it was like, okay, how am I going to do this? So that kind of put that on hold for a bit, and then it sort of kept picking away because I did commit to making it with the grants that I had from the Ontario Arts Council and Toronto Arts Council. And so I had to figure out my economic situation, which wasn't good at the time. And then sort of a few years later, kept picking at this piece and trying to figure out how to make it and how much would be animation and how much would be other stuff. So I started like using that as a core nugget, the story Aurora came up with, and then kind of building around it to sort of thinking about my worries about having a kid. And is this a message to my son? Is this a message to my grandfather? Is this a message to me? And then kind of drawing these links between myself and my grandfather and his past, and then myself and my past, and then kind of leading up to the present. So filling the gaps with sort of suicide attempt as a kid. And it felt like it all of a sudden became important to talk about everything, which is probably something that a lot of Jewish people in my generation that are creating stuff have this problem where not only is everyone dying who's experienced something, and these in the face of people saying things didn't happen, so you've got this urgency to capture all of their memories and all their things that they experienced, but then also there's this weight that I had growing up of like capturing the potential of everybody else that died, that didn't have a life, and that you've survived because they didn't. And that sort of survivor's guilt 2 generations removed creates this urgency. And I mean, I talk about the film being a hot mess, which I think it is, but I think it's in a good way, in that like it's better to tell something in a mess than not to tell it at all. And that sort of felt important.
In a very good way.
Yeah, thank you. And I like the noise it became. So anyway, that sort of started changing that way. Then I ended up being in a better financial position, enough to go and film it. And then the film, my grandfather passed away after we filmed, and then I spent more time in the film and wanted to incorporate that as a key thing. And then I guess the penultimate thing that changed it was not getting into some festivals. And there's a few key festivals, and it was there's no reason why a festival should or shouldn't accept you. And there's all sorts of like the programming, timing, themes. It was a ridiculous thing to fret over, but there was enough people around me that I think very highly of. And they're like, of course, this is an important film. They'd be fools not to take it. And I'm like, no, you never know. They're like, no. It's like, it's gotta happen. Like, so then when it didn't get a few rejections, even though it was a rough cut at the time and not final audio and not final VFX and no color and no music, and like, so it's like that temp thing. I'm like, no, I'm a failure. It's all wrong. So then that's when tried to reimagine it and let out those feelings in that closet over there with this microphone, which is why I have this microphone. So I went there and started recording these thoughts and sort of laying it over top of the film, and that created this something that I don't think I'd seen before. So like this almost director's commentary over the film when the film was there. Then that became interesting, and the dialogue between what was said and not said seemed engaging.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because you started out with a really clear idea of what you wanted to achieve, but sometimes it takes a really long time to get to the core of the feeling of what it is you want to achieve. And it just took that long. And it's funny, like I could never have really done it. We could have made a beautiful fable and it would have been fine, and it would have gotten into film festivals, but I don't think it would have done the thing that ultimately this does.
Yeah, I agree. I think like it's I know there's a lot of people arguing for just make the film about the kid and the grandfather. Just make that film. That's like that's even after we had shot it. They're just like, lose everything else. And I don't know. I feel like I'd rather take a big swing and miss than to make the not that the story about a kid and his grandfather and transforming into a deer to battle a Nazi in a kid's room is like normal, and that's just the normal film version of the film to me. But yeah, there's people that have advocated for that, and there's people that miss what the film was, but that are like angry I had to change it, but also feel like the better film came out of it, which is where I sit.
But I also think the story about the kid and the grandfather is tied to everything else that you're talking about. Yeah. Like that relationship has so many webs that shoot out, and like Spider-Man, that relationship has so many webs. And so even if you did write a straight ahead film about a kid and his grandfather, all of the other stuff is implied and then unexplored. So,
well, actually, it sort of ties into a later question I was going to come to, which was, about the challenges. And obviously, you've sort of, there's been a lot of challenges, and obviously you've sort of changed things along the way there. But also, I was going to sort of come to the point about the sort of director's commentary style of it, and where why that came about, and was it there from the early on. But obviously you've kind of gone through some of that, but if you could talk a little bit more about that, the change with the commentary and the
it's interesting because we were talking about it with Darren before, and it's kind of, on one hand it feels like something great and original because the director is kind of you know, like in theater, breaking the fourth wall and talking to the audience directly. On the other hand, some may say that it reminds them the like Blu-ray commentary, which you can put on the, you know, on the disc to listen what the directors say. And the third funny thing is that although it felt really fresh for me, funnily enough, on our festival, we had two films, yours and another one, who had the same similar approach, with director talking to the audience. Another film is called The Work It Class, and the director was talking through the screen subtitles with the audience, and it also was like a bit, yeah. So anyway, if you can elaborate on in this direction.
I think my goal was to try and make, I mean, it's funny to hear Aurora say like, oh, Sean had a clear vision of what he wanted. I'm like, I feel like that changed so much over making the film. And the thing I hold in the highest regard is to try and make an honest film. And that always feels like a really hard thing to do. Which maybe just for me, or just, you know, it's articulating it, or even just coming to honesty in your own head about what it is. So like what the film was about always felt like this kind of evolving, moving target. And I think by the end of it, I not only did the film change what it's about, but still having that core nugget of that core relationship 100%. But I feel like I changed as a result of making the film. And that was key. Like I changed who I was, my relationship with my parents, with their past, with I came to a new understanding of that. I mean, hopefully came to some focus over how I relate to these ideas in my own past and my son. So that something in there clicked in terms of like when you're creating something. I don't know how you feel, Aurora, but like I feel like I can't control how an audience is going to react to it. I can't say like, here's the message I want them to get from it. And there's, you know, here's the thing that's important that they understand. I can't ever, that's not up to me. I can try my best, but I can control trying to put myself in a position where I can change and grow as a person. So if I can go through the experience doing that, that feels valuable.
Mm.
Do you ever go through that, Aurora, and the stuff you're making? I mean, I know you've done some work that also like helps to sort through trauma and issues and thoughts. And
I think at the core of it, and what you did with the film, is if you get to a place that's very, very honest with yourself, you can at least, of course, you can't control how people react to it, but you can at least feel settled in the fact that you've gotten to the very core of what's true for you. The difference between advertising and art is that advertising will leave you with an answer, and art will leave you often with a question or the bud of an idea. And so I think that's what you've done. There's a lot of, I think, settled truths that feel like springboards to ideas and new possibilities. So yeah, you never can control the takeaway, because people have different lives and different things that they take away.
yeah, I think I'm a big advocate now for not having answers, like just for asking more questions, and like just, you know, not leaving people with like, not what is this about, but more like, yeah, how do I feel about something, or how do I think I advocate for not knowing as being an okay thing.
As a filmmaker, I kind of relate to this question, which I don't have answer for, is, are we making films truly to the audience, or are we making them for ourselves? Are we trying to sort our past, future traumas, insecurities, fears through creating the films we do? Or we are just keeping, you know, cold nose and just following the trends in film industry, trying to deliver some stories which people want to see now? So I guess different people might do different, but that's something interesting to think about. I had a question to Aurora about, tell us, Sean, you can close your ears, so be sincere. Tell us about process, how you were collaborating with Sean, because he was telling how he was changing your initial story a lot. So as a screenwriter, because I'm a writer as well, and sometimes it's hard to collaborate with others because you have your ideas, you're passionate about them, and then the film is all about collaboration. You cannot make film on your own, and you always need to make changes. So can you tell us how Sean was, how you were looking at the changes he wanted to bring, how you were, I don't know, fighting over something or agreeing with everything, if you can share?
Well, I think at a certain point, this is so deeply personal to him. And we did discuss, like, you know, I have a completely different childhood and grew up with entirely different stories. So I think at first I'd made this very sort of like crisp little fable that was full of all of these fantastical elements that he'd asked for. And I felt like I delivered this, you know, pretty effective piece of writing, and it didn't speak to his experience. And I think the moment that I understood that, I was like, this is impossible. Like, this is an impossible task. I never could speak to his experience because I haven't had it. And so at that point, I think it became a thing, like a bit of a labor, not a labor of love, but a bit of a project of love, that was really about supporting him in making this thing that was necessary to make. It really felt like not as much about me at all. It felt like a true collaboration, and it felt like a really important collaboration, and like I had a skill set that I could maybe lend to tell a story.
Do you think you were extremely generous in letting me run roughshod over this beautiful piece that you wrote, which, as much as you're like, I've crafted this fable and answered these questions, you also generously put a lot of yourself into it too. Like there's you're like, oh, I can't see this from his perspective, and I'm looking at the script going like, well, I can't see this from her perspective. And it was I feel like, yeah, on any other project we'd probably move forward in a different way and figure it out, but this, like, I think I came in with such a heavy investment over this specifically, because I'm like, there's a lot of, again, the weight that I'm trying to articulate something that's I hadn't articulated before, and I cowardly I'm like, Aurora, do it for me. And then that weight
No,
of,
man, that didn't feel cowardly. I do think the point of
no, I
art
wanted to collaborate.
is to like reflect ourselves back to us. And so it's kind of an honor that you related to previous plays I'd written in that way.
Oh
And
yeah.
so uh, it didn't feel like that. It just felt like an impossible task for me to do on my own. And if I can be of support, then I will. But you know what I mean? Like, even if you got like, if you got like James Baldwin and Joan Didion and like other incredible,
Yeah,
better writers, they could never write your story. The reason we
sure.
connect with them is they write their stories. And so if that's at the human core of it. So I never could have done it anyway. It was like an impossible task.
Which is
But it
getting
became
back,
a very possible task when we worked together.
but yeah, it became gets back to the question you're like about specificity and talking to an audience. But I always think the more specific you go, the more broad appeal it has. Like, if you're tying into something real and true, which is what I connect with Aurora's work. Like, I want that true feeling, but for me. So it's like, I tried to give her this info dump of feelings and things, and she came back with something that was like, I mean, the film wouldn't exist without her. Like, it's that initial interaction and what came out of it, and the things there are all and the magic that's there is all so key to the film as well, and grounding it, and not just being a rambling bunch of thoughts.
Well, and I think even if I had written a draft and you had been like, no, that's not it at all, but now I know what it is, that would have still been a successful collaboration.
You're extremely kind and generous. Yeah.
Talking, by the way, you mentioned the audience and their reaction. So what reaction, when you were creating the film, you were hoping to evoke from your audiences with the film? So of course you cannot know, because again, all the audience have different background and different level of love to your film. But what did you want them to feel after they finished watching?
This is a hard one because I'm so close to this film. It's hard for me to at some point trying to make it just became like, is this the right choice or the wrong choice? And being able to show a few people close to me, like, is this working? Is this funny? Is it not funny? Is this too serious? Is it too revealing? Or is this just I'm too up my own ass? Like, what is this moment? So like that, figuring that out kind of became collaborative with a few close friends. But I mean, there's a few ideas I wanted to get across, but in terms of emotions or feelings, I don't know if I was there. Like, and it's plays very differently. Like in Germany, audiences don't know if they can laugh or not. And then if in a genre crowd, there's a lot of laughter, but people aren't really expecting to have feelings necessarily. So it's and then in doc audiences don't necessarily, because it plays in like doc festivals and experimental festivals and genre festivals and narrative festivals. So it's which I love that it gets this big variety of responses. But yeah, docs sometimes don't. Some people don't consider it a doc because there's an animatronic deer in there. But I mean, it's to me, it's as documentary as anything else. Like it's, I mean, even if you're doing the most attempting to be neutral, putting a camera somewhere, you're still choosing where the camera goes and how long you're holding on the shot and doing that. So it's still this control. So I'm trying to make a documentary about my inner landscape. That's so yeah, it's been interesting to see it played in different venues for different audiences.
For me personally, it was it was interesting to see that you're kind of watching a story in one way, and then you're hearing like your voiceover, more like you say in the documentary. But I think it really, and it's unusual for people to see that kind of thing. You expect to see a story, and the characters are telling you what's through their actions, and then. But I think it was very personal, and it really sort of, I have a totally different experience as well, but to get that insight to your experiences, it was quite, it was, you could tell the emotion there, and it really, I think it touched a lot of people, I think. So, it was really interesting. Why do you think it makes it so special, in that sort of regard?
Just guess why we gave you an award for the best storytelling.
Why do we think we got an award for best storytelling?
Yes. There you go, Aurora.
Oh, it's really pretty.
Right?
Well, I do think that actually maybe through the initial exploration of the artifice of the fable, which is still a bit of a foundational stone of the film, you manage to get to a truth. And that's like kind of what fables do. That's what family stories do. These sorts of stories that we repeat to ourselves that are simple on the exterior, they get to the heart of something. And so I think we're able to use that as a sort of floorboard to stand on to get to a greater and deeper truth about your experience. And the specificity of it is so important.
I mean, you brought in I think I'm pretty 100% sure the
Brought
Demon
in
Box
a lot
was
of Catholic
you.
stuff.
You brought a lot of Catholic stuff in. But I mean, the Demon Box was like, we were talking about these ideas that you carry and the weight of carrying them forward, and this and how you pass on your family stories and your trauma, stuff you know and don't know, and how those things can they can fuck you up, or they can also save you, and then they can also mess you up again. So like this idea that you're passing this box that may feel empty but is also holding all these personal histories that you may or may not be aware of, I mean, that's also just so baked into the narrative. So I think there's a lot of levels to this story. So maybe that's why the storytelling award was given to us, because we're like, there's a solid core there, and then there's the hopefully somewhat innovative way of exploring the story we're telling on another level. And then also, I think a lot of the ideas are happening in between the visuals and the dialogue, and then this sort of post commentary that's happening over top of it all wrapped up together, where that's new. But in what isn't said in these few spaces where that you can think about that, I think there's still something else said. Feel
It
good about
was
themselves.
really a hard category, I think one of the hardest, because it's much easier to give award to best cinematography, just the film which looks the most amazing, it gets it, you know. Storytelling, it's much harder, and it's much harder to get a good story on screen, because nowadays technically almost everyone can make a film, you know. But to have a good story, this is hard. Well deserved to you. And you also got another award, which you can show us as well, which was the best impacts of war film, which again, your film kind of clicked with the topic of our year, and joined several amazing and touching and heartbreaking films discussing different wars in the world and what do we feel and think about them. What advice would you give to aspiring filmmakers interested in creating short films? And are there any lessons from your experience that you wish you knew when you started?
I'll take the second one first. No. I think it's the process. I think it's making those mistakes, and that is valuable, and that becomes a big part of it. Yeah, I think give yourself permission to, if you're just starting out, just give yourself permission to make bad stuff and just make stuff. Like just don't let not making it great in your head. Like everyone watches movies and knows what they look like, and like if you can't make it look like that, then that's not the reason not to make something. Just, you know, pick up the thing in your pocket that can tell a story, and just start telling stories. And I think initially it's just start playing and experimenting, and then figure out what your voice is and articulate things that way. Like make your mistakes, and you don't have to show it to anyone. I think I would say that first. Aurora, what's your advice for aspiring playwrights?
I think the question is what my advice is for aspiring filmmakers, and I feel like it's know a filmmaker.
Oh, you can say for the screenwriters. Okay.
Yeah.
I personally think that screenwriters are filmmakers, because I'm a screenwriter and I feel that I'm a filmmaker, although I'm not directing films.
I mean, we're storytellers.
Yeah. I mean, I mostly write things that don't get filmed, but I do think something that was important and made this work good was to be very, very, very loose. If you're in a collaboration, you know, what ends up happening is not 50% you and 50% the other person. It ends up being a slurry, and that is the point. And so allowing the work to be fluid, and for the idea to exist in between you, and for the purpose of the thing to exist in between you. If you are in a collaboration and it's your first collaboration, let it be very, very loose, and dispense with as much of your ego as you can, because you will have a better thing.
Yeah, so, well, basically, I'd like to tell us more about if you've got any upcoming projects coming up, what's in the pipeline, or where can we see things, or where can people, see more about yourselves?
I've got a few projects that are in the feature zone. I shot a self-funded micro-budget magic realism film, which are words that shouldn't go together, in my grandfather's house after he passed away. So that's still in post and still articulating what that is. But it was a desire desperately to capture what the house meant to me before it was gone. And yeah, I kind of gave myself permission to make something that may or may not have been good, and just to get it down, called Alterations. So it's still working on that, and just trying to find time to work on that between life and finances and family and health and everything. It's been hard to rub 2 days together on it. There's another project called Idaho Winter, which is a collaboration with this writer named Tony Burgess, who he and I've been trying to work together for a long time, but this is another feature adaptation of a book of his called Idaho Winter. So we're pushing that forward, and that's been it's been getting some steam from various festivals and production people, and sort of figuring out a roadmap for that. In making alterations, and before I shot it, I kind of created a window of time to kind of come up with some ideas. So like I've there's a whole giant pile of feature ideas now that I've got that are like, I can't afford to do that, but that's a good idea. So there's various topics that I'm going to keep exploring.
Yes, yes. Keep an eye out for the book. It will be called Julius Julius. It's being published by Strangelight, which is an imprint of Penguin. Very excited about it. It's about a 2,000-year-old ad agency. Made that up. Founded in Pompeii. And I'm developing a play with Voyage Theater in New York. And that will, I believe, be mounted in the fall of 2024. So
cool.
everything's a long way away. But lots of exciting. Yeah, I guess it's not that long. Yeah.
Can you talk about what it's about?
Oh yeah, it's about when you see someone you love who has died everywhere after they've died, and the sort of process of seeing their face in every face that you come across and reckoning with that. And yeah, living with grief.
Can I ask you a question
So
about that one?
Yeah.
Sorry, cut you off.
Super funny. It is super funny, I think, but yeah.
Well,
did that come from was that existing before they approached you, before you approached them, or was it did it come out of that discussion? And if not, like
they were like, if you ever have anything for us, let us know. And then I figured I had something for them with this particular team. Yeah.
I was wondering how you know if it's like a play or a screenplay or prose.
Yeah, I mean, if I hear two voices talking, it's usually a play. And if I hear two voices talking and someone like you is like, want to make a film, then it's usually a screenplay. But it's a prose if it's prose, I can't stop imagining a world and wanting to inhabit a world. So actually, I think I have clear guardrails.
That's cool.
Thank you so much both for spending almost an hour with us and answering questions. And we're going to share it with our audiences, which we hope will be growing. And also we hope that at some point we will see your new films at our festival, and hope we will be growing bigger and better, and we'll be able to sponsor filmmakers coming to our festival as well, which I think can be very important when you are living quite far away from the festival. So yeah, good luck with all of your projects. Please keep in touch and keep us updated. We want to continue being friends with you.
Thank you for all the hard work you do. You guys are amazing, and doing, like, putting together a festival is so much work and important now to build community and have discussions and share things and have these conversations. That's especially coming out of a pandemic, like spending time with people together is a beautiful, wonderful, important thing.